Angela, a very warm welcome from my side. Well, we know each other since quite some days, and what I'll try to find out today, not for me, maybe a little bit for me, but also for the people watching, um, what made you to go into science and what kept you there? Because I think these are things that we all have our personal answer, and I'm curious to know whether there is one universal answer or how the individual answers make a big picture and probably encourage people. Oh, good, yeah, that could be me. I think this is the kind of thing I'll try to find out today, and I'm very glad that you came here and that you're available for this discussion.
Well, it's actually my pleasure. I'm very happy to be here with you. And the question is a very important question. And just to start, I would think that there are many answers to that question. In my case, it was very easy because I always wanted to be a scientist. And don't ask me why and how, I just don't know. But I always wanted to know, how things work. And I wanted to learn more about, things that you could see. And, I have this thing that happened to me when I was a kid. I always wanted to have one of these boxes that you can actually play with chemistry, that for kids. I think that now they are very different, much safer, I believe, nowadays. But at the time I wanted it, and finally my parents gave it to me. And, I was always sort of trying to do experiments.
So where did you do your experiments? You come from Madrid. Did you do it there in the flat of your parents, or did you live in a house where you had an own laboratory, or how, did you do it on the kitchen table?
Actually, in my room, in the flat, we lived in Madrid in a flat, and I have, my small room, and in there, I was actually mixing things up coming from the box. But I did some experiments out of the box, and one day the whole thing exploded. Nothing happened really. It was just a, small accident, I would say. Nothing happened to me, nothing happened to anybody or anything. But that was, enough for my mom to actually make the box disappear forever.
How old were you when you started doing these things?
I think I must have been, I don't know, 9 or something like that.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
kid, really.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that these games, these things with tools and regions to mix up with. Of course, there were protocols in there. They were supposed to be for kids from 7, which now I don't think it would. That doesn't happen. But it is already quite a few, days ago.
Yeah.
I say.
No, I remember I did something very similar, but I couldn't afford the big box, so I just bought the handbook and we could go to the pharmacy and just get all the ingredients. That was fun.
Interesting, no, very much fun. But I don't have any you know, background, scientific background in the family or anything like that. I was, and I still am, the only scientist in my family.
So it just happened. It's a
Just happened
spontaneous thing.
spontaneously.
That's good. And well, this is more chemistry, but how did you end up in biology?
Oh, this is also very interesting. As a matter of fact, you're very right. I wanted to be a chemist and I wanted to study chemistry. But the year before going to university, I had a fantastic biology teacher, professor. She was amazing, and she was showing us, life really, and how could you sort of, learn the, diversity of different creatures and how the different environments can actually produce and maintain, different sort of, environment really. And, I really wanted to study life. I have to say that I was always, more sort of inclined to the animal kingdom. So I wanted,
Not the plants.
plants for, I don't know. Well, maybe because, well, I don't know, but I was going to say because I lived in Madrid, not so close to nature, and actually close to a zoo, close to the Madrid Zoo. And I really loved going there, and I wanted to do that. But actually, always from the perspective of still, sort of biochemistry and molecular biology. So I decided to study biology, and at the time there was 3 years of biology, and then you could choose going for fundamental biology or zoology or molecular biology, and I decided to do molecular biology for, sort of my historical reasons. I wanted to be, biochemist, and also because at the university, Autonomous University of Madrid, Universidad Autónoma, I was really very good for that, actually. That is the place where developmental biology, was so important for Spain and for, internationally as well. The Madrid Fly School. Very famous, that Antonio García Bellido started, and then there were people like Ginés Morata, Joan Modolenyo, all these people, really very good. So I decided to actually do my PhD there. But not working in Drosophila.
Right. Your PhD, you're talking about your fascination for animals, but your PhD was not that much in developmental biology.
Not at all.
So how did you in the end choose? Did you choose your PhD? Did you choose the topic? Or was it something where you, okay, there's an opportunity, it's close to my heart, close enough to my heart that I do it? Or
well, indeed, I mean, it was not anything to do with developmental biology. It was pure biochemistry and biophysics also, which was not, I mean, biochemistry I liked very much from the beginning. Biophysics, I mean, I wish I would have liked, because it is fantastic and important, but it wasn't what I was thinking of. But, to be very honest with you, and I think this is also, maybe interesting for many, students to know, the PhD project wasn't something that I really was excited about, but it was the opportunity. And the opportunity was not only that university, but also the department, the Center for Molecular Biology, where everything was actually happening. And actually the best developmental biology was actually there. So I could, be sort of embedded in that atmosphere. And then for my postdoc, which I think is when you, at least in Spain, what you really can choose what you want to do, then I decided to start, sort of increasing the levels of complexity in terms of, from molecules to cells, and then from cells to individuals. And that's what I did.
Would you argue that the PhD it's not that important, that it's 100% match of interests and...
Well, I don't. I mean, as scientist, I don't have the control for that experiment, right? So
that's true.
I wouldn't know. But what I'm saying is that in case you have an opportunity in which you see that you will be learning and you will be exposed to good science, I think that there is still a lot of time. So this is, something that you were mentioning also yesterday, that we were also talking here with the students. Sometimes, you have to sort of, make a decision, and then you think that this is going to be forever. But no, there is a lot of time, and you can do different things, and you can expand your knowledge. So I would argue that, expanding knowledge when you're young is actually the most interesting thing you can do. Because I was doing more biochemistry, biophysics, as I told you, during my PhD. Then I did cell biology, and then developmental biology. And now I still remember my background as a biochemist, and sometimes I use, these sort of approaches, this type of thinking, which is different, And so I think that, expanding a bit knowledge is always good. So I don't regret it.
So I think it's more or less reflecting that as a PhD student, you're still a student, which in Germany is seen differently. So the end of studies is when you're entering your PhD. I think also in my perception, I would argue that PhD is still part of your education.
Well, I mean, formally it is, right? Because, I mean, PhD students means you are still, and you are actually getting, I mean, trying to get the highest level that you can get in academia, right? So you become a, doctor in PhD. And this is, I think it is still training. It is training, and we have to be very conscious about that, and we have to help students going along, the process until they present the project.
So the way you describe it, you would argue that postdoc is scientifically the best time in the life of a scientist?
Yes, I think so, because, I mean, and don't get me wrong, but at the postdoctoral time, the only thing you have to do is enjoy your science and do experiments. I'm not saying that it is always easy, sometimes the projects are very challenging, but you know, usually you do not have other responsibilities that come associated with, you know, science and science policy and all that, and of course hiring people and you know, having, you know, good atmosphere in the lab and in this institute and institutional you know, commitments and things like that. So when you're a postdoc, you have to take your project to fruition and you have to enjoy science. But I think that we really have to enjoy science, you know, all along our career, which is what we do.
Yeah. No, but I can see that very, very, very well. So what would be your advice if a PhD student coming, very good in doing the science, but maybe a little bit depressed because of the frustration the job brings, and they ask, should I go for a postdoc or should I go to industry?
Well, I mean, when we started, I think that we were more sort of a, you know, directed ourselves or the environment or whatever it was to academia, right? But I think that now there are many other paths, and science and society need all the paths and need professionals in all these different, you know, aspects of science and society and outreach and communication, and you know, and companies and many, you know, I mean, there are many different alternatives. I know what you mean by, you know, frustration, and I think that this also goes during the PhD, and now, particularly after pandemic, I think it is very important to, you know, to tackle that question. It's all, as in, you know, all other aspects in life, depends on your expectations, right? So science, as everything else, you know, has some difficulties and challenges, and particularly experiments don't work always. I mean, actually, no, the opposite many times don't work, and you should know that. And I have seen that particularly for students that have been really very good students and have been always very successful, you know, whenever they face themselves these challenges and experiments don't work, they feel like they are, you know, failing, and that this is a failure. So I would say, no, this is not a failure. This is part of the process, and it is the normal, is the usual thing, and you should be encouraged to continue. So I would say that, you know, what you need is a bit of resilience and, you know, to understand that this is normal. And it could be extremely difficult to understand and even weird to have everything working. That would not be, I mean, it's not what it is really in real life, right? So just keep on doing that. I had to do that during my PhD, had a difficult difficult situation because I discovered an artifact that was actually embedded into the whole protocol that we were using in the whole lab, right? And that was not, I mean, that was difficult. But, you know, I don't know how, don't ask me why, but I decided that I had to sort that out. And when I did that, that was fantastic for me and for my career. I do not recommend this to anybody, but but in the end, it turned out to be very interesting, you know, and a very good lesson for the rest of my career.
Right, because what you describe is something that you sorted in the best possible way. What we sometimes hear, and I guess you know cases, is that students are kind of collapsing under the pressure and eventually start, well, fantasizing or generating data. It's a very critical topic, and I think we're all afraid that this may happen in our environment. Is there something where you would say, okay, the environment can take care that these things aren't happening, are seen at early steps? What could be done to help students to escape that pressure and not run into a trap that in the end for science is fatal?
Well, this is a very important topic, but the first thing I would like to say is that even though it's been, you know, discussed and has to be discussed now, is not that common. It's very infrequent. This is the first thing we have to say, you know, for the students or for, you know, PIs that we have heard some cases, you know, particularly lately. Of course, we have to prevent that, and you know, this is very serious, and we have to say that this is not the way. Of course, it is not. And I think that yes, the atmosphere matters a lot, And indeed, it also means that we have to be following our students, our postdocs, people working in the lab, our technicians. We have to discuss, all the time, very often, and we have to develop this feeling of trust. And you can do that, and we really have to prevent that from happening for many different reasons. First, because it is not science, and we are here for something else. We're here for, learning and for knowledge and for the progress. And second, because the person who's actually sort of feeling that this is the only way out and do that sort of, creating, data, is also suffering from it. Mm-hmm. So it's not a good situation for anybody, not even for the person who actually provides this beautiful data. So no, this is clearly not the way out, and I think there are ways to prevent it. Well, you never know. This might always happen, but at least to detect it at a very early stage in which it can be sorted out.
You mentioned yesterday that it takes you longer to publish papers because you want to ultimately try to falsify the hypothesis that the students may try to verify.
Or myself,
yeah.
Yes.
Is that the way?
Well, for me it is the way, because, how can I put it? I don't know how much influence it has, this sort of experience I had in my PhD. So for me, controls are much more important than the real experiments themselves. And because I feel good when everything is consistent, right? So consistency is a word that I use very much in my lab for my students as well. So it doesn't matter if you cannot really interpret something, because this can happen. So results are the results, and the results have to, sort of stay, and they do. The interpretation can actually vary depending on your knowledge and on the, knowledge in the field. So there isn't anything wrong in interpreting something in a way that in the end is not correct, as long as the experiments and the results are correct. So then you can, by learning more from your own data or other people's experiments in other labs, then you can reinterpret maybe and learn more about your process. That is okay, But it is true, and sometimes I think about it, that in my case, I always want to have, consistent, robust data, and also, make sure that we have looked at all the aspects that we can look at, and that everything is consistent.
So maybe that discussion sounds a little bit too negative, because in the end, this is not what drives us forward, but rather it's these super positive, very singular events that are just fantastic. And I guess we all have a few of these moments, and I'm just curious, they must be there for you as well, and what are they? The super exciting.
Okay. So yes, the discussion we had before seemed to be a bit negative. No, I don't think so. But we have to deal with everything, and the expectations I was mentioning before is really what matters. So I think that the students have to be, they have to know how real life in science is, and to me, it's wonderful, because it gives you freedom. Probably more than in any other job, because if you are in a place where you can actually develop your project, many times the limits is your imagination and your capacity to actually pursue your project. So this is fantastic, and this doesn't happen in many other jobs. And also it is fun, and also it's not boring, and this is very important, I think. Every single day is different. So now, going to your point, which are these sort of stellar moments? If I think about, I can think of several of them, but I can tell you actually two. Yeah. So one was when we were doing screenings for genes that were expressed in the nervous system, when I was finishing my postdoc in Mill Hill, National Institute for Medical Research, in David Wilkinson's lab. And we, and also Rolf Krumlauf next door, they were looking at the neural crest, this fascinating population that is actually generated, on top of the unlagging of the nervous system, and then cells delaminate and go away to form many different tissues. It's a fascinating population. But it wasn't that easy to actually see that population migrating out in the embryos. And one of the genes that we isolated classical way, that was still, that was in 1990 actually when we saw that, and then 1992 was when we saw this thing. Suddenly, by looking at the expression of one of the genes that we isolated from that screening, we suddenly saw the whole neural crest population on top of the neural tube and migrating out to the different places in one single image in the whole embryo. So that was, my God, this is the neural crest, and that was really very nice because it was the first time that we could see the whole neural crest actually like that, and that meant that we could also follow, the migratory pathways in a much easier manner than it could be done before, and also it meant that we probably were dealing with a gene that was involved in the, sort of encoding a protein that can help cells migrating out, and turned out to be the case. So that was, that was 2 months before I was meant to go back to Spain to set up my own lab. So needless to say, that was perfect timing, and that allowed me, and actually immediately, so I want to work on this, and this is what I did. Yes.
These days, they just do single-cell RNA-seq and they find things that are up or down regulated. How did you come up with looking at these particular genes at that time, that decades before single-cell RNA-seq and any kind of screening approaches? You had to have a hypothesis to start with.
Well, at the time, I mean, remember, this is, late 80s, early 90s. Last century, of course, and at the time, Drosophila already had provided us. I mean, people working with Drosophila had provided us with an amazing amount of information about how embryos, grow, and patterning mechanisms for morphogenesis, and we already had a toolkit of genes that were extremely important for that. So the idea was that maybe these genes were also important for vertebrates. And that was the time when I actually joined Dave's lab, when, the Needy Bull and Rockrun lab were actually finding the Hox genes, sort of providing positional information in the anterior-posterior axis. And they were, the genes that also looked really very, very interesting. So we decided to go for those, and we were using a probe for snail. Snail was a very important gene at that time in Drosophila, being discovered because it was very important for mesoderm formation. And then another colleague there, Michael Sargent, had actually isolated the homologue in xenopus. So we took that probe and we were screening a chicken library, and we found the homologue, and one of those were actually the one that sort of showed this fantastic pattern of the neural crest.
So it was the homology between Drosophila and vertebrates on the one hand, but in the absence of crest in Drosophila, the expression in crest was a surprise.
Absolutely, completely unexpected. And as a matter of fact, the thing is that at the beginning there was a very sort of rough screening, like a head versus trunk even in xenopus, and the idea was that head must be nervous system, right? And in the end, snail was described as a mesodermal inducer, which is completely different. But if you think about it now, it had to do with migration, and therefore the most important migratory populations in the early embryo are actually the mesodermal cells and the neural crest cells. So that was the link.
The starting hypothesis was wrong, but it still gave you an absolutely essential thing.
And that was, the idea, because of course in Dave's lab I was working on the hindbrain and hindbrain segmentation, and of course it was something else, something completely different. So I talked to him, and he said, well, it is very nice if you can actually continue that, but it is different from what I'm doing. And that was the perfect match for me to actually set up my lab in Madrid. And this is, what I did.
So how is it to really start something of your own from scratch? Because that is the next big step. right? Doing a postdoc, you describe this as absolute freedom and no responsibilities, just doing good science. And now a lab is a completely new domain.
Yes. Well, this is really a crucial step, right? But by that time, if you have done, a PhD in which you learned a lot of, things, and then you did a postdoc, and you think yourself already, while you are a postdoc, what would you like to do next? And what is the next step in your career? Because it can also be that you decide that you don't want to continue in academia, even after postdoc. This is fine. If you want to continue in academia and want to set up your own lab, then you have to start thinking, what is it that I would like to do, and how would I see myself in 5 or 10 years? This is very important. Having thought about it. And then, of course, you have to look for an institution that allows you to actually develop your project, or in which you can find colleagues that you can actually talk to and you can have a good relationship with, and establish a bit of a network, mainly with other postdocs that at that time that now they're going to become also young group leaders in different institutions. This network also, really works very well. In my case, I have to tell you that I was very fortunate, because while I was still, postdoc in London, I applied for a permanent position to the Spanish Research Council. It's a nationwide competition. It was a difficult one, but I actually won one position already to set up my own lab with a permanent position, which is very unusual. And now it is, well, I mean, it can happen also, but it is very unusual. So I was very lucky. However, I have to say that starting point and, the early days were not easy, because, I ended up in a very good institute, but they were not expecting me to go there somehow, because as I said, it's a nationwide competition in Spain, sort of works like that. And now it's a bit different, but at the time I could choose where I wanted to go, and for different reasons I thought the Cajal Institute was very good, but it was very tough at the beginning. So it took me, I had to work really hard, but things worked out really nicely.
They did. Would you think it's important to have and supply the young group leaders with a permanent perspective from the very beginning? Because it's actively discussed here in Germany. I don't know whether you've seen that from the outside. Ich bin Hanna, there is this situation that, well, people working in the science field don't have a perspective, and it just extends or doesn't. And this is generating maybe a very vague atmosphere where people eventually decide not to stay and rather to leave.
Well, again, it's expectations and opportunities. I think that maybe, I mean, if to be honest, the postdoc that I was doing in London, was not my first postdoc.
Yeah.
That was my, I would say, third, postdoc. So at that time I was sort of ready, even though I wasn't feeling that I had the right to have a lab. So I didn't have big expectations for myself. No, I didn't. But I actually wanted it, but I was not feeling frustrated if that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So it was my third postdoc, but that was something that I had decided to do. I have to say that I was offered the possibility to get a permanent position before that, and I didn't take it. In Spain, also in Madrid, and I didn't take it because I thought it was too early and I wanted to learn more. So I actually, that's why I went to London. I had been in Germany, Munich, and also I did a postdoc in Madrid after my PhD working on cell biology. So, I think that right after the PhD, a permanent position would be a bit premature for many reasons, including that maybe you yourself don't know really whether this is what you want to do. And I think that the tenure track system is perfect, with a very good evaluation after, say, maybe 5 years nowadays is a bit short. I would think that a bit longer than 5 years would be better. But then, people need to know that they can actually have a life and a family and feel comfortable, because otherwise, they cannot work very well. And you know, it is more difficult to concentrate on your project if you have to be dealing with other issues, including stability and all that. And, you know, stability is a problem that we always had in Spain. But of course, there were always these permanent positions, but the permanent positions very few. So, so now, you know, our labor law has changed, and we are changing many things now. But we still need to have, you know, stable supply. I would say stable, you know, funding that it is increasing, and that has to increase. And because we have wonderful institutes and very good scientists, but we still need some more funding, stable funding.
Indeed, you do. The Spanish scientists are, I think they're really at the top of the world. And I was always surprised that they would all go back home, even though conditions were anything but optimal. So what drives you back home? Why would you take a position in a setting where it's not optimal? I'm pretty sure you could have found something in the US or somewhere else in Europe with better conditions. Nevertheless, you and many, many others decided to, no, I go back to Spain and I work there.
Well, I suppose it depends very much, but as a general sort of, you know, feeling, in Spain, family is extremely important, and people like to be close to their families more than in some other countries. Of course, I mean, there are other countries, I mean, Southern Europe in particular, we, you know, have very strong links with our families. But in addition, you know, I think that, again, it depends on the expectations, and it also depends on personal, you know, situations. In my particular case, I was in London for 3.5 years, almost 4 years, and my partner stayed in Madrid. So we were separated already for 4 years, almost 4 years. And also my father got very sick. So I had offers to actually, I could have stayed in the UK, and I had, you know, other offers, but I thought that it was time for me to go back because of my, you know, my partner, my family, my father. And also, you know, I thought that I, you know, as I said, this was my third postdoc, so I thought that I could actually give back to my country.
Yeah, I think it's good. Well, I'm still in Germany, so
well,
same thing happened there.
To say never regretted,
Yeah.
to, you know, actually had gone back at that time. That was the end of 1992. So we have just celebrate, I mean, we are just in the 30th anniversary of my lab.
And well, after Madrid, where you had been at an excellent institute, you say, well, with a famous name and everything, and I was actually very surprised to hear that you're moving to Alicante. And I guess many people were, but what was your motivation and the ultimate trigger that made you take that big step and move?
Well, this is a not very usual move in Spain, because, I mean, if you think of Spain, majority of people will be thinking of Madrid or Barcelona, and at that time more Madrid still, no? And I was in Madrid. I was from Madrid. My family was there, and yet we actually moved to Alicante. You know, several reasons for that. One reason is that Carlos Belmonte, a neuroscientist, was actually putting together what it looked as a very interesting project and very interesting institute. So he, with a lot of effort, he actually managed to start this new institute in Alicante that was actually a joint venture between the university and the Spanish Research Council, because the University Institute existed already. He was the director, but he wanted to do something bigger and, you know, bigger. And so he made this alliance with the Spanish Research Council, and that was the idea. So, so I, well, didn't mention that, but I actually had divorced when I came back to Spain, and so then I had my another partner, Juan Lerma, who's a neuroscientist, a scientist. I met him at the Cajal Institute, and actually the offer was for the two of us. And so that made a lot of sense, because that also, you know, allowed us to actually go to a new place and try to help, you know, in the generation and growth of this institute, and that's what we did. But the interesting thing is that we actually moved with our labs, with our group, you know, almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody moved with us. And that was very good because, it was still Spanish Research Council, so it's the same institution. So we just, we could take our pieces of equipment, everything. It was just like a move, but we didn't change position.
Mm-hmm.
So we kept our position, but just working somewhere else. And we had the opportunity to design our labs and everything. So that was a very, very exciting thing to do.
So would you think that this is a natural step, that after establishing your group, where it's more about building your science, you're moving on to step 2, where you go to a new place and extend your science, but also build an institution? Is that a natural evolution or development in the life of a scientist?
Well, this is one path, but I mean, you cannot imagine every scientist doing that, because then there will be an institution per scientist. And I have to say that actually Carlos Belmonte and Juan, my partner, they actually put a lot of effort into that, and I helped from the point of view also of developmental biology. But I mean, they took a big, part of that. But I think I always thought, going back to my motivation to go back to Spain, I always thought that I had to do community work and I have to help my country to try and do better in science. So I've always been very much involved into that, and I've tried to help not only my institution, but also, sort of Spain as a whole, if I could, and well, I've done what I've, could.
That's one thing that is very altruistic. On the other hand, of course, your science continued to be excellent. As we all know, excellent science depends on excellent mentors, but also on excellent students. So how did you manage to either attract them to Alicante or maybe restart the education that in the end, at the level of the PhD, you get the quality of students, but you need to run a lab at a consistent level?
Well, I mean, this is not easy also, but the Neuroscience Institute in Alicante soon became a place where people would like to actually go and work, and that helps a lot. So we do not have many local students. I mean, we do, but we also have people coming from many different places in Spain, and particularly other countries as well. So one thing that we are proud of is that this is a very international institute, and we always had, people who really wanted to join, and this works. And I think that diversity is extremely important in science as well, because this is an opportunity that science offers. We have friends all over the place. I'm very proud to say that I have friends in many countries, and if I go there, I feel, home somehow, not like here. Mm-hmm. So we manage, to attract also very young, very good young PIs. And the department, developmental neurobiology department at the Neuroscience Institute in Alicante is well known for many years already, due to all these young investigators who actually joined and were very, very good, and very good at attracting funds as well, which is also very important for the institution.
This would have been my next question, because everything we described couldn't work without, let's say, the money that keeps the whole thing fluid. On the one hand for the science, but also for attracting new heads and maintaining that. Is that something that works okay in Spain? Or apparently it has worked okay, but I could imagine that this is a major effort.
It is. I mean, I would say that it can work, but the effort you have to put into that is quite substantial. But it is very clear that we have excellent institutions and in life sciences in different places. I mean, of course, Madrid and Barcelona, but also other places. I mean, I would like to believe that Alicante is one of them. So we have Seville, we have many others. I mean, I'm thinking of developmental biology in particular, right? And they're working. So the effort is substantial, but then it is very rewarding to see that things work and things can happen. Of course, the problem is always maintenance of that. Maintaining high level, maintaining excellence is extremely, I don't want to say difficult, but I mean, you have to always put energy into the system.
Well, I once heard from a politician who said that it takes many years to build something that is excellent, but it takes one wrong decision to destroy it.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes, and yeah. So I would say, of course, there are places, institutions which are sort of more robust for historical reasons or circumstantial reasons, whatever it is. But in general, things can be destroyed very easily. So we have to be extremely careful with that.
Well, and then there is the turnover, right? We're all developing lifelong, as we discussed yesterday, and eventually we're moving out. And how do you ensure that the whole thing you've been investing so much into is in the end a sustained investment?
Well, this is the hope, but I really don't know what's going to happen. At least some of the things in which we have invested a lot of energy are actually, working, and they will be working regardless of whether I or, my close colleagues are there or not. It might be different, but this is also good for science, and things are changing very much. I mean, many things are changing, really. Even the way we think about science, the way the mission and the vision is changing. But this is, we don't have to think that this is going to be worse. No, why? I mean, it might be better, and probably, likely will be better. So I'm really looking forward, and I remember my friend and excellent scientist and colleague and my mentor maybe also, Juan Modolell, he died recently. I remember he was telling me, the one thing that I really regret if I have to die is that I don't know what's happening in science, the new developments that other people will be telling me. He told me that, and now I'm starting to think that, he was really very right.
The next generation, the new students, well, I think us growing older, we believe that they don't have the same spirit sometimes, but I guess this is not true. So what is your hope and expectation for the next generation of young scientists to follow?
Well, I mean, my expectations are always high. I'm optimistic by nature. I think scientists, we are optimistic.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, now we are at a very tricky point, because I think that pandemic affected us in many different ways, and we still don't know the result of that, the outcome, and we don't really know also how to handle it, because it's been acute and brutal, really. I mean, the impact on our families, our old people. I mean, that was devastating. And also, the expectations, because everything seems to be a bit insecure now, even economic situation, inflation in Europe, and the war. I mean, a war in Europe after pandemic. I mean, we were not expecting that. So I think that we don't know what's going to happen, but I hope for the best, and I think it will be okay. But you were specifically mentioning, how do I see the new generations? Again, I think that as part of our responsibility, we should have maybe told them that life was not so beautiful and happy always, and I think that maybe we were not doing our job properly for the kids, right? So kids should be, kids and teenagers and young people should be exposed to challenges as well, and maybe we were not doing our job very well on that aspect. Because again, if you expect that every experiment is going to work, if you expect that you're not going to be, sort of under pressure to get your things as you want them, this is not real life. And also, one thing that I believe it is extremely important, whenever things work, if you're used to that, you don't even appreciate.
Yeah.
However, when you're looking for something and fighting for something, when you get it, you're extremely happy.
So happiness only works if you suffer before?
Oh, well, I would not like to say that, but I think that it's actually maybe true.
No. I would like to come back to one aspect where maybe the more experienced, more senior after the pandemic may have a special role. Because I feel or sense that things are more or less floating after the pandemic. And I think, shouldn't it be you, us, in that kind of age category and experience category to really show and lead the way, rather than wait how things go back to normal, that no one knows how it was?
Probably, but I would not like to think that we are sort of in command, so that we have to tell them what to do. I don't think this is our job. But I would not like that. But what I do is that I continue with all the energy I can, working and being optimistic and having, this passion for science that I always had. And I think that this keeps me, going. And I hope that I can sort of transmit this feeling to my people and the new generation.
I think that was a perfect concluding remark. Thanks a lot. I really very much enjoyed it. I learned a lot of things, and I see even more parallels than I had seen before. Thank you very much again, Angela. It's been a real pleasure.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.
So, you see, and maybe we should say to the general audience that none of that was scripted. It was a spontaneous discussion, and it just developed the way it went. And I think this is the way we take. Thank you.
Thank you.